Hello and welcome to the first episode of Nothing Ventured for 2026, and boy is it a great one. Today in the studio with me I have Alok Sama. Alok is the author of The Money Trap, Grand Fortunes and Lost Illusions Inside the Tech Bubble, and one of the most battle-tested deal makers in modern tech finance. He served as president and CFO of SoftBank Group International and chief strategy officer at SoftBank Group, where he led landmark transactions including the $34 billion acquisition of Arm, the $59 billion Sprint T-Mobile merger, and the $8.6 billion sale of Supercell to Tencent, and major Alibaba disposals, whilst running corporate development, proprietary investments, and IR across the group. Before SoftBank, he was a senior MD at Morgan Stanley, building TMT and capital market franchises across Europe and Asia. And today he advises Warburg Pincus, chairs Valhalla Ventures Advisory Board, and sits on Bear Capital's board as well. In today's episode, we talk about how Masa Son is easy to admire, but impossible to emulate.
Masa is easy to admire, and I do admire him, impossible to emulate.
So. Why sometimes it makes sense to sell out of your schmuck insurance, and why in early stage venture you need to unlearn the numbers because narrative wins every time.
But the first thing you need to do is unlearn all those lessons.
Yeah. How at one point innovation in the valley got misdirected, but hopefully we've come back from that, and why following your passion is the worst possible advice you can give.
Anyone who tells you to follow your passion, that's the worst possible advice you could give someone.
How fortunate accidents and serendipity define your life journey, so go easy on yourself, and why learning how to think critically is the most important skill you can have today.
Just learn how to think critically.
And finally, what is it that moves Alok emotionally? Intellectual curiosity.
I'm really driven by intellectual curiosity.
Let's get straight into it. Hi guys, whilst I've got you for a second, I just wanted to reintroduce myself. My name's Arish. I'm the host of Nothing Ventured, the podcast where I talk to the people behind the stories that make the venture ecosystem go round. I am also the founder of Emerge One, a consultancy that provides fractional CFO service to venture-backed tech startups from seed to Series B and beyond. If you enjoy the podcast, we'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe wherever it is that you listen. And should you want to talk to me about anything, whether that's an episode that we've released or a guest that you think could be great to have on, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn or X. I'm always up for a bit of a natter. Right, let's get straight back into it. Alok, thank you so much for joining me today. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, for sure. Well, look, we're going to dive straight in, right? So your time at SoftBank and specifically working with Masayoshi Son was obviously at times insane. And some of the deals could be considered either genius or crazy. As you say in your book, Masa's endearing acknowledgement was that living in the future comes at a price, and that for Masa, normal was the cruelest of insults. So I'd love to understand from your perspective, how much the deals executed at SoftBank were truly visionary versus kind of hubristic? And what are the lessons that people should take from that unique style that SoftBank brought to investing?
Masa is easy to admire, and I do admire him, impossible to emulate. So this is one of those stories where people always look for takeaways, etc. And look, I mean, you could sure as heck learn something from his life. Resilience, for one, the number of times he's been written off and, kind of in the Guinness Book of World Records, having lost the most money ever and then bouncing back. And right now he's bang in the center of things in the world of AI, which we can talk about. But what really sets him apart is this X factor, this sort of being what he describes as being this crazy guy who lives in the future. And there was a spell, you used the word hubristic. I think Masa, even though he didn't use the same word, he kind of said that's what he meant when in 2021 when he said he let himself get carried away by the successes of the past, which sounds a lot like hubris, right? So I think there was a spell that he went through in 2021, and I think that's probably true of 99, 2000 as well. But getting away from that, he's had a remarkable track record of identifying tech megatrends early, right? I mean, he did that with the internet. at one point in the year 2000, he owned 8% of all internet stocks, if you can believe.
Yeah,
Richest man in the world, ahead of Bill Gates for a short period, for a week. But
a week
but
is
again,
a long time.
And big numbers, right? So. So you got that right. He was wiped out. People assume, he didn't call the top of the market, and net worth declined by 95%, etc. But he, again, not the greatest of traders, but he was not quite wiped out, but certainly took a big hit. But his comeback story, people assume, was Alibaba, but not really. Alibaba came much later. Success of Alibaba came much later.
Yeah.
It was betting on smartphones.
Yeah.
And so he saw that coming.
Yeah.
The whole Web 2.0 phenomena. And then he bet big on Alibaba, obviously. And, and not just sort of a bet, he was fairly instrumental in tweaking their business model. I mean, it started off as a B2B model, and then he's the one who encouraged them, saying, look, I'll bankroll you. Just give it away until you get to 80% market share.
Yeah.
Don't charge any fees at all. Help them get to be that dominant player in that Chinese e-commerce market. And then we've seen it again with AI. His big bet was, when I joined Masa in 2014, he would talk obsessively about AI. 2014,
14,
right? Yeah, almost 10 years before ChatGPT kind of came on our consciousness. So his big bet there was ARM, and his mark-to-market gain, as we sit here today, on ARM as an AI bet is over $100 billion. Yeah. So he's got these mega trends right, and that's kind of what sets him apart. Is that something you can learn? I don't know. I don't know if there's a secret sauce to it. He just does that.
No, I completely get it, because I think, and we all know this, right? In the world of venture, you are going to take some bets that aren't going to work out, right? And obviously everyone likes to topple those that are at the top. So when the WeWork kind of situation happened, I guess, the people were just waiting to pounce on that. But equally, exactly to your point, if you look at Yahoo Japan, if you look at ARM, if you look at, all of these other bets that he took, and some of the
SoftBank Mobile,
exactly all the mobile plays he took. Yeah. These are, and I think this is the whole point with the Vision Fund and everything else. This was never about, to your point, being a trader. This was about long-term directionality of where the world and the internet was going.
You mentioned Vision Fund and WeWork, and I think this is really important, and it's kind of this is actually a really important point. And let's talk about this, because you could get the mega trend right, but it's not easy to get the timing right.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
So with Masa, it was a case with the Vision Fund, for example, for being, I don't know, give or take at least 5 years, 6-7 years, perhaps ahead of his time.
Too early,
right?
Yeah.
So raising $100 million in 2016, talking about AI. Well, what were you going to do with $100 million, right? And that's why when people come along and, you've got $100 billion, it's literally the $100 billion at that time was, the total volume of venture investing in the United States in the prior year was under $70 billion. So what are you going to do with $100 billion?
Yep.
And someone like Adam Newman comes along and he solves a problem that you have, which is, what do you do with all this money? And kind of packages what was essentially a real estate story as a technology story.
Yeah.
And that's how mistakes get made, right? Yeah. And now, look, if he had $100 billion now, he's spending more than $100 billion on AI.
Very easy to spend $100 billion on AI today.
Exactly.
I'm like,
too easy.
Yeah. So this is the thing, right? Like, so I did a news episode a couple of weeks ago for wrapping up last month and Q3. 50%, I think it's 50%, I can't remember the exact numbers, but about 50% of total venture dollars in Q3 went to 18 companies, right? Yeah. And the majority of that would have gone to XAI, OpenAI, and Mistral, right? Yeah. So very clearly there's that kind of concentration in AI at the moment.
And of course the big numbers are with the hyperscalers, and it's not venture, but it's more infrastructure investing.
Well, this
monumental numbers.
This is exactly it. But he was on the ground floor with that with ARM, right? So. And I think exactly to your point, right? You can be directionally correct, but too early. But that essentially what that allowed him to do was create a platform for today where, he can actually point to the things where he was directionally correct. Yeah. And those opportunities to invest those sort of volumes of capital are very much there today. Yeah. Now, okay, one can ask the question whether he will make the right bets. That's that's a question.
Well, his big bet is OpenAI and the ecosystem around that, right? Apart from ARM, obviously, which is bigger, but we shall see.
Yeah, look, but let's face it, right? OpenAI is what brought AI into the consumer sphere, right? If they had not released ChatGPT and had a consumer facing interface, we may not have been talking about AI in the way we were talking about it today. And let's face it, AI is like 40, 50, 70 years old in terms of the thinking behind it. And obviously machine learning and AI equivalent kind of algorithms have been written so on for forever, right? Yeah. And so I guess just wrapping up on that kind of bit around Masa, because I get the impression from the book very much that, exactly as you said, you had a huge amount of respect for him. It sounds like you challenged him on some of these, some of these bets where you didn't think that there was, that it wasn't a rational thing to necessarily do, and especially the WeWork investment, I think, is probably the most obvious of those. But I mean, it must have been incredibly wild. Some of the deals that you guys were doing, which, I mean, they're just incredible. I certainly can't imagine doing some of those deals. Was it overall, from your perspective, the right place, the right time for you for that period that you were working there?
I don't know about right place, right time. I mean, I look at it from a very personal lens. Yes, I have tremendous respect for Masa, but I also had affection for him, which hopefully also
definitely comes through.
I like the guy, and I liked hanging out with him. He's a fun guy, infectious sense of humor, and we drank wine together, and we played golf together.
Always the same bottle.
We exactly, yeah, and we had a lot of laughs together. And candidly, I miss that. Probably I value that, and I miss that more than I do the $1 billion deals or $50 billion deals, because you get a little bit jaded at my age. Kind of been there, done that. I've been doing that stuff for it sounds ridiculous.
So
for 40 years.
If he asked you, would you go back?
No, I've been there, done that. I'm just actually it's just yesterday I finished writing. Well, you never really finish till they snatch it out of your hands, but I'm pretty much done with my second book, which is fiction. So I'm in a good place. So it's.
I'm definitely going to have to look out for that. I mean, if the non-fiction was anything to go by, the fiction's going to be pretty.
We shall see. So no. I mean, that world is behind me, and candidly, I'm not sure I have the energy for it, or at least my energy is directed in a completely different direction.
Or the appetite, I guess. Yeah.
But like I said, I mean, there are elements. There are times. Having said that, I mean, look at what's going on in the world of AI. It's tempting. It is very cool to be in the thick of things.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about having schmuck insurance anyway, right? So you're still there, right? Like you still get to
not
participate.
anymore, by the way. I sold out of myself.
Oh man, okay, well.
Well, yes, it's actually an interesting story, which is it's a commentary on what's going on recently, which I'm very happy to unpack a little bit.
Please.
I mean, you look at the OpenAI hype, the AI hype. I think SoftBank came to be seen for a period of, I think since summer as a levered play or a public play on OpenAI.
Yeah.
And the stock went from, mid 30s all the way. I think it peaked at 88, and now it's down in the 50s, right? And it got more than a little bit overdone. That's when I decided to sell out. I don't need schmuck insurance. I'm like, this is 6 years beyond me. But that, of course, is a function of, the shift in value from the OpenAI ecosystem to the Google ecosystem and the impact that Gemini has made, which we're happy to talk about, right?
Yeah.
I, for one, from a consumer perspective, I have switched from Gemini, and a lot of people have. Gemini is eating OpenAI's lunch for now. Who knows what happens? But it's sort of the Empire Strikes Back, right? It's quite remarkable.
Yeah, but it's also kind of not surprising, right? Like we've seen it happen
early
before.
days. You've seen it happen with browsers, for example, right?
With browsers, we saw it happen with communication tools, right? Like when you have the distribution, and your distribution is, at the very least at the moment, Google and Microsoft in terms of OS and so on, are the platforms that most enterprise use, etc. Like it's unsurprising that if their models are good, better, or good enough, even for that matter, they're just going to become the default, right? And we saw it with Slack. Okay, got bought out by Salesforce because frankly, Microsoft could roll out Teams to all of its enterprise clients, and
Sure.
it was good enough. I mean, however
You
much
got distribution. Distribution is key. And Google has distribution. Yeah.
And I think today, actually, distribution, and this is the thing that I keep coming back to, obviously a lot of the work that we do is with these kind of early stage businesses. Nothing is a moat anymore, right? Capital is not a moat because there is a lot of liquidity out there, albeit that the last year or so, it's certainly in Europe has shrunk significantly in terms of VCs raising funds. But the only way to win is now distribution, right? Like, and if you do not have a good grasp of how to engineer that distribution in a way that is not going to be easily attacked just because someone has more capital or their product is slightly better or whatever, then you're not going to win, right?
Yeah, well, it's product and distribution, to be
sure.
fair. And, Google was behind on product, and now, by some counts, arguably, they're ahead on product. So there's a lot of, it's early days, and there's a lot of going back and forth.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think the battle of the foundational models is not over yet, and who knows what's going to come next. So, I mean, like changing tack, and obviously just as you were discussing, you are a finance guy by background, and that really does come across clearly in the book. I wouldn't say that you talk about it ad nauseum, but it's very clear you understand kind of the numbers and how it works, right? But you actually stayed in there, dollars you can buy beer with. Which is something Professor Knudsen at Wharton would say, is the only thing that matters when it comes to valuing a business. And that unacknowledged in the valley is that savvy deal jocks create as much value as coder tech bros. We keep, I think, though, losing sight of this, right? And what it means to create value, free cash flow, being, I guess, the prosaic metric. So why do you think these lessons keep getting forgotten, right? Be it NFTs and crypto, meme investing, or the kind of potential AI bubble we're talking about that we're living through.
So let's separate issues. There's NFTs and there's memes and Dogecoins, etc. That is just complete, total garbage. It's gambling. We shouldn't even talk about that in the same breath as early or late stage technology investing. That's meme investing. It's fads. It's just take that. That's just not technology, right? I could, with respect to numbers versus narratives or tech investing, I could argue on both sides of that. And I think it's actually important to unpack that, because I do talk about both sides of that in my book, because I joined SoftBank, and it's interesting as a banker. Most of what you do is around numbers, on models and LBO models and so on and so forth, and IPO evaluations, etc. But the first thing you need to do if you're going to be particularly early stage technology investing is unlearn all those lessons, because you very rapidly realize that can be a handicap. So I'll give you an example. One of the first deals I did was in the ride-hailing space. So SoftBank is, I think most people know, well, those who follow SoftBank anyway, came to be the biggest single investor in the ride-sharing space globally, over $20 billion investing, including close to $8 billion in Uber. But this was early days, and we were looking at India, and there was Uber. The market landscape was Uber, and there were two competitors to Uber. And we looked at one, Ola Cabs. And, very determined, dynamic entrepreneur, Bhavesh Agarwal. I negotiated a deal with them, SoftBank's investment in there. And I looked at the numbers, and I had, someone on my team kind of do the numbers. And you kind of look at top down, what's the size of the market, how much are Indians spending on cabs, how much of that could be ride sharing, market share, and try and make some assumptions about margins and extrapolate what's going on. And very quickly conclude that this business is completely, totally worthless. Right? They're just bleeding money. They're bleeding like, 25 million each. They were doing the same thing in China. China, the numbers were 3 or 4 times that in terms of Uber at war with Didi, and there was a Didi competitor, which then I think the two of them merged. But the Masa way of thinking about that was different, which is, you've got to imagine a world 10 years out, 15 years out, when it's going to be all autonomous cars. And we're getting that. Maybe not in India, but you're going to have autonomous cars in London. Certainly, I've been on Waymo in San Francisco, and I can tell you that was, for me, in the world of technology, a real aha moment right up there with holding an iPhone in my hands, right? You've got there's a big leap of faith involved, and it's you just got to let go of the numbers completely, right? And kind of realize that whether you pay 400 million or 500 million for Ola cabs, buying 20% of Ola cabs is actually irrelevant. If you're right, then this is going to be worth
Massive,
tens of billions. And I do in the book, there's a chapter there about dinner with Mark Zuckerberg, which is kind of funny, which is wacky, and it's sort of episodic, and people assume I put that story in there because maybe I wanted to make, it's just good entertainment value.
Or whatever,
but you know what? There's a really, really important lesson in that because, and that's why I really wanted to include that chapter, which is people make fun of Masa. He's kind of caricatured as this guy, never saw a deal he didn't like, doesn't care about valuations. He passed on Facebook at a valuation of 10 billion because he thought it was too expensive. Valuation discipline.
And regretted it.
And he was sitting there with, Mark Zuckerberg. He wasn't worth $1 trillion then, or Meta, I guess, wasn't worth $1 trillion then, but it became that, right? And he passed on it at a $10 billion valuation. So you can't, roundabout way of coming back to, yes, it's dollars you can buy beer with, but do not underestimate the power of platform business models and how transformative they can be. And, Facebook, as we know, Meta turned into a huge cash generation in India. So eventually it's going to be dollars that counts, but you can't get hung up on that when you're sitting there doing your numbers.
At the early stage, yeah. So, I mean, I always talk about it as narrative over numbers, right? Like in early stage, and it's something that I've had to, like, I'm nowhere near to the level of you, but like you have to unlearn when you're a numbers guy, like the spreadsheet only counts for 2%, 5% of the investment decision, maybe, right? Like, and all that is, okay, do we directionally think that they have the right approach? Are they thinking about the business in the right way rather than, these are the numbers that I'm going to invest in? Because we all know that those models...
And it's betting on people. Alibaba is a great example, right? I mean, Masa Son, when he bet on Jack Ma, he talks about, crazy shining eyes, 20-minute meeting, speed dating, et cetera, et cetera. And that's probably all true. It was way before my time. But if you think about what Jack had at the time, didn't have a track record as an entrepreneur. He was talking about a B2B business model. It's not as if he came there with like, his not like Facebook at 10 billion, where it was a clear business model early stage. You just weren't sure how big it was going to be or whether it's going to be able to compete with MySpace, et cetera, et cetera. Masa bet on Jack Ma.
Yeah.
And Masa himself was instrumental, as I think I talked about earlier, in creating that business model, which is in China. Not many people realize it. It's not quite Amazon. It's not quite Google, neither of which operate in China. It's a hybrid of the two. Right? And Masa was very instrumental in coming up with that model and that whole strategy of giving it away till you get to 80% market share.
Yeah, which obviously a lot of people learned, right? And when there was kind of ubiquitous capital, I guess, right? Like that sort of whole thought process of VC subsidizing essentially the growth, so essentially is subsidizing the acquisition actually subsidizing the revenue to an extent, right? Like was a massive play. I think as that tightened, that became harder. And I guess my point, like around,
but actually not having revenue. I mean, the ridiculous thing about those early ride sharing deals is, this absurd notion of negative net revenue. You're paying people to ride, right? Your revenue really is, there's a distinction between, not to kind of geek out too much, but people in the industry will appreciate, there's GMV versus revenue, right? Yeah. I mean, these guys had you're paying people to ride. Yeah. Forget about GMV. I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah. It was, and we saw it really at peak even further when we went into the kind of 15-minute grocery delivery type businesses where essentially that was happening massively, but actually those business models again made zero sense, right? From a concentration perspective. But I guess, so I agree with you at that very early stage, that kind of narrative trend and betting on the person obviously makes sense, but it felt, and again, going back to the AI question at the moment, right? There are serious questions around the fundamentals, because the foundational models, especially, right, can only scale with more infrastructure, right? Like there is a fixed cost component or a variable cost component to their ability to scale. One of the brilliant things about internet platform plays was obviously that variable cost diminished over time. Yeah. So I guess the point I was getting to, or trying to get to maybe, is like, how do you think about, so with something as fundamentally with the fundamental potential, right, the explosive potential of something like AI, how does one get around that thought process where, okay, even if, OpenAI, is able to just capture 100% of the market for argument's sake, right, or whatever it is, will they be able to price well enough to be able to recover those kind of obvious incremental variable costs of scaling, needing more data centers, needing more compute, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where I'm coming to this whole question of like, dollars that can buy beer, right? Because at the moment, those unit economics just don't stack up.
So I'll give you an answer which every VC listening to this, or private equity player, or for that matter, public market investor, will throw up all over.
Excellent.
I think the best way to, because the questions you ask can't be answered.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
Satya Nadella doesn't have an answer.
Sure.
Sam Altman doesn't have an answer. Masa Son doesn't have an answer other than, sort of the audacity of hope, which we all get. It's big. It's huge, right? Okay, fine. Great. I get it. How do you play it? My view is just buy the S&P 500. I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Because I think you get the hyperscalers, the Googles of the world, and if you look at the value creation, Google, Microsoft, you look at the value creation as a result of AI, the lion's share, far and away, is being captured by them, right?
Yeah.
Two is, and this is really, really important, is AI is interesting at a consumer level. I use it. It's not transformational. If you took it away from me, it's not like taking away my smartphone, which I can't live without.
Yeah.
I'd probably miss it, but it hasn't been life-changing.
Yeah,
it's
it
a useful productivity tool.
Yeah.
It makes life easier, but kind of big deal. But at an enterprise level, the promise of AI is a productivity tool, margin expansion tool, right? So anything that's repetitive, take my old business, investment banking. You had David Solomon came out and said, we could write a prospectus now at like 5% of what it used to cost us. We can scrap all the lawyer's fee, et cetera. You don't need analysts anymore, right? There's a friend of mine who set up a hedge fund in Greenwich, Connecticut, and his initial plan was to hire a team of 4 people, and then he started using, I forget which model, deep research tools, and they're all great. And I don't want to promote one at the expense of the other, but whatever. He started using those, and he says, I don't need to hire 3 people, right? So that's happening across the board, whether it's customer acquisition, call centers, you have it. And every company out there is going to benefit from that in terms of margin expansion. People don't talk about it because I think they are wary. They don't want to scare people.
Yeah, they don't want to worry about like, you're going to all lose your jobs or whatever.
It's politicized too, right? Yeah. They don't want the governments, the regulators breathing down their neck, because I think the societal consequences, the displacement that's coming our way is huge. But what that means quite tangibly, callously from an investor perspective, is margin expansion. So you get the S&P is like, I don't know, 30, depending on which day of week, 35, 40% tech anyway. By the way, you've got the infrastructure layer too, with NVIDIA, et cetera, et cetera. And then you've got, financial services, everyone, right? Auto, everyone's going to benefit from AI as a margin expansion tool. So you capture all of that. So to me, that's the most straightforward way to play it, because mostly people are operating in no man's land. Yeah. Again, it's an act of hope when they're talking about investing in any one of these. Whether
at the application layer or the foundation model or whatever, right? But actually, if you take the broad view, you can capture the value irrespective.
And some of these, where it gets really, really silly is you've got no disrespect to any of these individuals who I don't personally know, but, you've got Ilya Sutskever and comes out of OpenAI and, kind of announces his company, Safe Superintelligence, and I've lost track. Kind of straight off the bat, you're valued at $5 billion, and Mira Murati comes out. Yeah. You're valued at $5 billion. Now, laugh at me. I'm making fun of them when I was making fun of them when they were valued at 5. They're probably valued at 35 or 40, sure. But they don't have a penny in revenue, no business model. Yeah. Right?
That was
where's the product market fit? It's insane, right?
Yeah, that was pretty much a PowerPoint present or whatever. Like it was a slide deck.
Barely that, right? It's so secret, I can't tell you, right? It's like that sort of pitch. that just gets downright silly.
Yeah, but and again, we've been through those cycles before, I guess. Like, and everyone wants to be in the next hot thing, and I think that's always been like a bit of the concern.
You're missing out.
Yeah, but actually, again, there's slight tangential. But what we're equally seeing is, like, certainly in the world of venture, right? You got this bifurcation of your platform funds, like the mega funds. So, whether that's a SoftBank, but equally Tiger, I think, has come back into the fray.
Yeah.
But Andreessen and Sequoia, et cetera, right? Like, they have the capital behind them to be able to kind of take those bets in those businesses. Whereas, for example, and emerging managers, I think, are able to raise capital because they're emerging, right? Like, there's a bet to be taken. But there's this whole kind of swathe of VCs in that middle tranche of like $50 to $200 million funds where, it's kind of too short for Peter, too tall for Paul kind of thing, right? Like they don't have enough to get in at those at the ticket sizes they need to into those big plays, but equally they're too big to go into the into the really early stage pre-seed. So I think that's I think it's changing the landscape. I think of how VCs are approaching all of this, and I think to your point, for the time being, there's going to be a lot of this, excitement and positive sort of noise and news about all these AI, whether it's models or whether it's application layer. But I think at some point, some of that reduces down to like a core element that are going to, if not win, they're certainly going to persist, right? Yeah. So, okay. So like moving on, one of the quotes that really resonated with me was when you said the smartest people in the world live here, and you were talking about Silicon Valley. Why the fuck don't they solve real problems instead of building silly social networks? And this was kind of my initial view until I realized that, sadly, world-changing technology is often too hard to monetize because people expect it for free, right? So the argument of the public good, right? The internet, GPS, etc. But with the benefit of the experience that you've had, do you think that potential still exists, or do you think that often these benefits are almost accidental, opportunistic, or emergent rather than planned?
That comment was made at a point in time where I do think it's very different now, because I think AI is fundamentally different. Is innovation in the Valley was, I thought, misdirected. Too much of it was directed towards TikTok and Snap are two examples, right? I mean, what is, TikTok is early adopter of AI, but it was all about AI hacking your mind and my mind.
Yeah.
It's like, whatever, you want to look at, whatever, I don't want to make fun of people, whatever your thing is.
Yeah, sure.
And it hacks your mind and gives you more of the same, right? So there was too much of that going on. And then there's enough stories, which my kids are a little bit older, so I have less to worry about, but certainly teens and, kind of how obsessive it becomes. My hat's off to the Aussies, by the way.
Yeah.
In terms of outlying social media for 16. And so that's where I was coming from. I think too much of that was kind of completely, too much of innovation was horribly misdirected. And I'm glad we've kind of moved away from that.
Yeah, I mean, again, my kids are older, but they are still not part of the TikTok generation, but they certainly are on Snap and so on, right?
Yeah.
And I think, so where I was coming at it from, and I'd agree, right? Like, it was a combination of, too much social media. Like, I had a guest on a couple of weeks ago who had founded like one of the biggest AR companies in the UK back in the mid 2010s. She had kids, and then she's basically set up a not-for-profit called Scrollaware because she's like, our kids are just wasting like massive tranches of their time just needlessly and mindlessly scrolling. And I would take it a step further, right? Then we had things like 15-minute grocery delivery and lots of kind of apps that were not necessarily utility, but potentially just were, financial engineering, certainly in some instances.
Well, 15-minute, I mean, quick delivery, quick commerce has some utility, to be fair.
Yeah, I
not huge, but
maybe it's the Desi in me, right? Like I mean, whilst it was being subsidized, great, right? Am I going to pay a premium for a bar of chocolate?
No, in India, the Indian consumer is notoriously the most price sensitive in the world, so you're not going to really pay up for that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that was kind of the concern I had, but also I get, and it's a bit, I think it's actually a bit like what you've been saying about Masa. that vision of that better future, right? You know, it's that, you know, the old meme, we wanted flying cars and we ended up with whatever, right? I can't even remember what the end of that end of the quote is, but you know, I guess it's this feeling that tech should be inspirational and should deliver
solve
real
problems.
change.
Solve problems, real change.
Exactly that. Yeah. And I think we also, not just in the consumer world, but even in the, you know, in the B2B world, we just went down the route of kind of putting nice front ends on spreadsheets, right? And those sort of businesses started gaining huge amounts of value. So okay, but so you think we've come back from that?
I think we have. I think we have. I mean, I think by and large the capital allocation to as a mega trend, AI is different. I mean, it's a genuine productivity tool.
Yeah. It can add value. I mean, it certainly has added value in my business. But again, it's interesting. I think there was some research I scanned earlier today, which suggests that whilst there are a lot of individuals within enterprise using AI, and it's certainly, you know, allowing them to be more productive, enterprise like writ large is still struggling to adopt AI across its workflows. And I think that's the next, you know, that will be the next iteration of that kind of productivity. And,
totally.
And
look, I mean, I most of my time, my obsession right now is writing, and I think I told you, you know, yesterday I kind of submitted the early draft of my book. Now, this is a 300-page document, and normally, you know, a year ago, 2 years ago, I would have read through before sending it to an editor every page, etc. Now it's like takes me like 30 seconds for you just like shoot it in, and it spits out any grammatical errors, any punctuation errors. I can screen for word repetitions, expressions I've used too often, little ticks. I mean, it's just so efficient.
I'm gonna have to ask you what tool you're using for that, because I have been struggling with editing my my book for the last year. Well, I was struggling is probably too strong a word. I haven't actually attempted to edit it yet. But exactly to your point, right? Like trying to read through, and also it's very difficult as an author to read your own work and pick up the potential mistakes within it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, of course.
Much easier to outsource that, right?
By the way, I mean, I've been through the process of a book going through a kind of a professional editing process. Yeah. It was torture. Yeah. And I hope my publisher isn't listening, and I won't name them. But I mean, the idea of, two people were paid to copy edit. Yeah. 2 more people were paid to proofread. Yeah. And the entire process took 4 months. Yeah. And they had to build that into the publication timeline. Yeah. And that is, in today's day and age, absurd. It's crazy. And by the way, the people who do that stuff are going to lose their jobs. Yeah. There's an entire department that's supposed to design covers. Yeah. The first time, kind of the people in the US, when they did it, actually didn't like what they did. The people in the UK and India did a great job. But set that aside, that's not the main point. Point being, you don't need that department. Yeah. I mean, I can have a vision of what I want this cover to look like, and I can use Gemini, I forget what it's called, Nano Banana or Sora or whatever, to come up with exactly what I want. Yeah, no. I mean, and those are the things where I think that utility becomes incredible. And it actually allows, I mean, the one thing I would say is, I think you and I both probably have the same opinion, right? Yeah. Like, sadly, there's a lot of AI garbage out there, right? Like, and a lot of what is being written by people, you can now tell very, very explicitly when it's been written by AI and when it hasn't, right? So as a tool to assist in the process, great. But what I really hope we never get to is a point where it is the process, right? Where you don't write your book, but your AI writes your book for you. Because I think then we lose some of the kind of value that, and you actually talk about it. Actually, we're going to get onto this in a second as well. But, you talk about that and our creativity is one of the things that makes us human, right? And I think, this is why recording a podcast and having a conversation for an hour is a hell of a lot more interesting than listening to 2 AI bots trying to do it. Yeah. But in your opening, right, you say, as far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a banker, said no one I ever met, which is, I mean, like Goodfellas is one of my all-time favorite films. So I couldn't help but include that quote. But going deeper, you start the book talking about your university days and whether you followed
the advice to follow your loose goal rather of solving at the time the unsolved Fermat's last theorem. And then you later joke about whether you follow the advice to follow your passion or follow your talent. And if you had you'd been ended up sitting on a beach in Barbados smoking weed whilst reading Zadie Smith and listening to Steely Dan, can completely relate, other than I don't know who Zadie Smith and Steely Dan are maybe. But given all those challenges, right, the immensity of what
for my money, the greatest living British writer.
I'm gonna have to check it out again. Yep. But my take on that is Terry Pratchett. But anyway, that's a separate conversation. But given all of those challenges, the immensity of what you're able to achieve at SoftBank and outside, the obviously bad bets like WeWork, etc. Is there an alternate world where you could see yourself as that mathematician outside of the world of finance and investing? And what is the best advice you could give to those people that are grappling with that choice of passion, talent, or money?
Wow. So I think the talent, passion, only I don't know, 1 in a million, in terms of the Mozarts of the world, they don't come around that often. Yeah. Right. So for what I have to say is kind of applies to the general. I think anyone who tells you to follow your passion, that's the worst possible advice you could give someone. Yeah. Right. Because that is, and I say this again, it was tongue in cheek, but I actually really mean it. What was my passion? What was I really good at? Probably just like hanging around a beach, smoking weed, and listening to Steely Dan and reading Zadie Smith. I mean that was like, I really got off on that. Kind of. For other people, it might be, I don't know, playing cricket or whatever. Now, if you're a Sachin Tendulkar, fantastic. Otherwise, what are you going to do with your life, right? So that to me is dangerous advice. The best advice I can give people is, kind of biggest life lesson, if you will. It's sort of uninspiring, is I kind of feel that my life, which by most standards, normal standards, people would consider to be successful in terms of, kind of family stability, having made a little bit of money, is the role of serendipity. Yeah. Right? I mean, with me, it's been a case of mostly fortunate accidents so far, right? And the best advice I would give to my younger self, and I would give to people in their 20s, is go easy on yourself, right? Because there is just, I do talk about this. It's a recurring theme in the book. Yeah, you do. Features that word illusion. Yeah. Features in the title too, is this illusion of control. Yeah. The notion that you could set objectives and get to where you want to be. So much of it is serendipity, right? And that, by the way, frequently extends to technology investing too. Talk about ARM, right? Come back to full circle. ARM, phenomenal success for SoftBank, but for Masa, for a different set of reasons from what he anticipated, right? ARM has become a play on AI at the edge of the network. Energy efficient AI deployed at the edge of the network. Fantastic. That's the reason the company is worth what it is today. When he started off, he was coming at it from a communications angle. Yeah. He was thinking of it from the perspective of communications at the edge of the network.
Yeah. So he was thinking of the telco play.
He was thinking of the Internet of Things, connected devices, connected refrigerators, right? Which at one point people thought was cool, but do you really want your Samsung fridge to be connected? I mean, it's not that exciting,
it's
right?
Fine. Yeah.
So we'll live without it. It's serendipity, right? I mean, kind of the ability to pivot. Yeah. Whether it's a business model or your life. So to me, that's a lot of what managing a career is about.
I would 100% endorse and agree. I mean, serendipity is something I talk about all the time. My life has been just one frequent set of serendipitous. Yeah. I mean, just my mere birth was serendipitous, right? Like the family I was born into and what that allowed me to do and all the rest of it, right? But and you talk about you talk about your kids a lot in the book as well, and kind of some of the relationships and the Big Lebowski and how you I guess how you encouraged them as well as guided them, right? To take their own paths, and I think it's I think it's really difficult when, especially going back to this whole question of social media, etc. When you're seeing the successes, or certainly the purported successes, or the performative successes, right? It's very easy to sit there and think, well, shit, I should be able to do that too. And why is my life so sucky and I haven't been able to do that?
Yeah.
And the way I think about it, I guess, is, it's cliched, but yes, you do make your own luck, but there is still luck involved in that. I think a lot of us don't appreciate, especially in venture, I don't think we appreciate how much of that success, and you just talked about in the example of ARM, how much of that success.
Yeah, the whole confusing luck with genius, absolutely.
Yeah. And I feel like, we maybe some of that hubris, that arrogance, whatever you want to call it, right, needs to be deflated a little bit, right? Like, we're all human and we're all gonna make mistakes. And equally, like, I love the fact that you've come full circle. Well, maybe not quite full circle, right? But from mathematician to investment banking to SoftBank to now writing, you found the thing that it sounds like that you wanted to and loved doing. But everything you've done up until now has allowed that, right?
But exactly. But that's an indulgence I've kind of earned after 40 years of doing a lot of it, most of it, arguably, doing things I didn't necessarily enjoy all the time.
Yeah. So I guess the question, like, to flip that question around, maybe would be, if you'd have started a career as a writer, would you even have been able to get to where you are today? Like, would you have been the next Stephen King?
Well, I would have been in a different place. Who knows? I mean, we can't predict that, by the way. Stephen King isn't my role model, by the way. Maybe Zadie Smith is, but it doesn't matter, right? I mean, I have no regrets.
Yeah.
By the way, it goes back to coming back to this theme of, like, advice for youngsters, etc. I get that a lot. And part of what comes up is I'm just not big on, that old line from Mrs. Robinson, The Graduate, rather, right?
Graduate,
plastics, right? I mean, there's always a thing of the moment, right? And same thing with education. People often ask, what should they be doing? And you and I both know 5 years ago, 10 years ago, people would have said, in fact,
STEM,
I have heard, STEM, and even more specifically, my son, who's now 32, he was repeatedly given this advice. The one core skill you got to pick up is you got to learn how to code.
Yeah, software engineering.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
Which is the stupidest thing in the world, most useless skill in the world right now.
Today,
right? I've actually been completely consistent, and I've never steered my kids career-wise, but I've been unequivocal in terms of what they should do in college, which is liberal arts. Just learn how to think critically. Read classics, study psychology, do film study, whatever you want to do, right? Read books. Just learn to think critically, develop intellectual curiosity, because that's the only thing that's never, ever going to go out of fashion.
100%. So my younger daughter is applying for university now. I think the applications are going in today, maybe. And it was really surprising because forever she didn't know what she wanted to do, like literally forever. And she was like, I'm not really great at anything and I don't really love anything. And then over the last couple of years, as she's been finishing off high school, she's really developed this passion for biology. And she then developed it further and wants to go into immunology or microbiology or whatever discipline. And she kept asking, what should I do? I said, do that.
Yeah.
Like I actually, my initial thing, because she loves debating and she's argumentative, maybe that's just with me.
Yeah.
And I just said, okay, maybe you do something like philosophy or do, politics or something that's going to, exactly as you say, engage your brain and allow you to kind of pursue that. What's interesting for me, and it's really hilarious, again, coming from, from the background I do, I read languages at school, at university rather. Hated the course actually, but was very good at languages. But at the time, my uncles were writing me letters saying, stop, like go and do economics or accounting. And why are you doing languages? And actually, as it turns out, if I fast forward to today, one of the reasons I get to do this and write and, whatever else I'm doing in my life is because of the skills that I learned as a linguist. I'm able to talk to other people because that's essentially what it was all about. And so, I don't think you can ever draw this kind of direct path from I did this here and therefore that my life is going to end up in this way. And in fact, if anything, and what I keep saying to my kids as well is, look, in the next 5-10 years, I don't know what your career is going to look like. So learn how to be cross-disciplinary, right? And figure out, what is the way that you can have the biggest impact rather than, this thing is going to get me from A to B, right? They are entering just a completely different universe, right?
Yeah.
So when talking about AI, though, you say, and this is coming back to that point I was making earlier, you say originality, even when it flirts with absurdity, is always thrilling. And in the race against the machine, it may be our last stand, right? And I think this is the most powerful argument we have as humanity to avoid slipping into a world where everything becomes a homogenous kind of soup of what people are calling AI slop right at the moment. So again, for your children, or more importantly, their children, what is the advice that you would give them and all of us as we enter that kind of uncharted territory of ever-evolving AI?
I mean, I don't have anything new to say beyond, or more to say beyond what I've said already, which is I think it's a fantastic productivity tool. I think all this talk about the super intelligent, artificial general intelligence, I think it's overdone. I don't know what that means. I think from everything I know about AI and my experience with AI, it learns by kind of analyzing what came next before, which is a process that by definition precludes originality. Right? And to
it's
me,
predictive rather than
but predictive, kind of in a regressive sense, right? I mean, you look at, you extrapolate based on what happened before. So whether it's a pixel or whether it's a character, next letter in a piece of writing, you extrapolate based on what came next before. So you can ask a writer, an AI to write in the style of a certain writer, but the beauty of great writers is they evolve, they experiment, right? I mean, there's some who, and this is actually interesting, there's some who have the same style, the John Grishams of the world, not to knock him, or the Stephen Kings of the world. I think those are going to go out of fashion because they could be replaced by AI. I guarantee you that you will, because those are formulaic. Right? I guarantee you could, there will be a point where you'll give an AI algo a name and it will crank out a series that's based on a same formula.
Yeah, like a Dan Brown, like it's always.
Exactly, right? Instead of predictable, sort of dumbed down. I'll keep on cranking those out. And people will still read them. You don't have to tell them that it's an AI.
Fiction, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, a lot of those writers don't even use their real name, but whatever. I mean, the point being, that's formulaic. But true literature and the ability to, kind of human experience and to write originally, kind of the way, J.D. Smith's write, or the way Martin Amis used to write. I mean, kind of Nabokov, completely original. Kind of how did he think of that? That to me is like, well, we shall see. That's a lot tougher to do.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I definitely hope that we don't lose that because, I mean, I think, as I said earlier, that's what kind of makes us human and interesting, right? Like, I think in a world where, there are lots of things trying to grab our attention, the most interesting thing is who you are as a person, right? Rather than, whatever algorithm has thrown up at you. No, I think I would fully agree with that. I want to round off with a couple of questions that we ask all of our guests, Alok, if I may. So what is one thing that you have a contrarian opinion or conviction about from any area of life, whether that's work, politics, socially, or at home?
Yeah, I think we touched on this. I think this belief in serendipity. And I think, we just get so hopelessly overdone on being goal-oriented. Frequently, those goals are monetary, etc. That we lose track of, how important it is to let life happen. There is this recurring motif through my book, which you touched on, which is this movie called The Big Lebowski. And people often ask me, like, why are you so obsessed with this movie? And it's exactly that factor. It's like, I'm really analytical. I was goal-oriented. And for that reason, I'm fascinated by, pot smoking hippie from Venice Beach who just kind of lets life happen. So that's kind of the one thing I would pass on.
Yeah. I think I watched The Big Lebowski when I was a fair amount younger, obviously, than I am today. And I think at the time I didn't get it. I must revisit it. It's like
nobody gets it. Very few people get it the first time.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I probably didn't get it and then said, well, I'm not going to watch it again. Maybe it's time to revisit. And finally, so we can get to know the real you, although I think we've probably learned a huge amount already. What is something that moves you emotionally?
My family or friends probably won't like it, but I'm really driven by intellectual curiosity. So I'm actually really moved by learning or discovering something. I mean, I read obsessively. If I'm not reading, I'm listening to an audiobook. And every now and then, something kind of clicks, something a writer says that kind of like, okay, wow. I mean, I'd never thought about it that way. And it moves me not just at an intellectual level, but at an emotional level, almost as much as watching sort of the day-to-day, kind of, my kids are gone now, but, kind of those little experiences, which, again, kids are 32 and 30. Maybe it'll change when I have my grandchildren around me. But to me, kind of that's kind of what I get off on.
So without putting you on the spot, and feel free not to answer in that case, but if there was one book beside The Money Trap or besides Zadie Smith, what or even if it was Zadie Smith, but what is one book that you would recommend?
Oh boy, I'll the one book that comes to mind, spontaneous, is a book called The Rings of Saturn, by a writer called Winfried Ziebor, German writer. And the reason I throw that out goes back to something I said about intellectual curiosity. And that book to me is a tribute to intellectual curiosity. It is not quite nonfiction. It's not quite fiction. I guess it is nonfiction. It's a writer teaching in North Anglia. He's going for a walk on the desolate in Suffolk, actually, the coast. It's quite desolate out there, if you've been out there. And every person he meets, every place he visits, triggers a stream of consciousness, a chain of thought about art, about Western civilization. His father was a Nazi in the German army, unpacking some of that. And it turns into literally a history of Western civilization, but seen through the eyes of someone. And it just highlights how important it is. It's actually really important from a venture investing perspective, kind of being in the moment, being aware, look around you. What are people doing? Kind of how are they behaving? And the idea that and it's particularly true in a place like London, where there's a story everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, look at you, the blue plaques in London. That's why even my book starts off with me walking down a street, Grosvenor Square, and I see this, kind of actually Brook Street, seeing two blue plaques with Jimi Hendrix and Handel. And there's something to unpack everywhere. So.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. Well, I definitely know what I'm going to be reading over Christmas. Alok, it's been such a pleasure having you here in the studio with me today. For our listeners, where can they find you online? Are you on LinkedIn, on X?
I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on X, and I'm on Instagram as well.
Amazing. Well, we will certainly put those in the show notes. For the time being, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here today.
Enjoy the conversation. Thank you.